Right, good evening everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Planning Policy Committee on Monday the 8th of December, and welcome to those people viewing us from the Rochester District Council's YouTube channel at home. Can I draw everyone's attention to page 3 please within the agenda, which sets out details regarding fire safety instructions and the webcam arrangements, and ask people to turn their mobile phones to silent please. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, please leave the building via the nearest exit and make your way to the assembly point located in the Market car park adjacent to the Civic Suite building. Please do not return to the building unless given permission by council staff. And for the benefit of those watching from home and those in the public gallery, members of the committee are seated in the front row and non-members of the committee in attendance are seated in the rows behind. And can I welcome Councillor Arthur Williams, who is substituting for Gary Myers, who sent his apologies, and looking around the chamber, I think everyone else is here, but I welcome visiting members, the leader, Councillor Danielle Belton, Councillor Judy Gooding, and Councillor Jim Cripps. So I think that covers off all the people that are in here tonight. So there we are. Right, we turn to agenda item 2, and that is to receive declarations of interest. Members, have we got any declarations of interest? Councillor Steptoe.
Yes, Chairman, just to register, I'm a member of Essex County Council and also a member of Barling Parish Council.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Steptoe. Visiting member, Councillor Mrs Danielle Belton.
Thank you, Chairman. On advice from the monitoring officer, I'm declaring a conflict because it seems somebody has put my home address forward as part of the SAM report for testing as a potential site. It doesn't stop me participating in any debate, though. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. And that's duly noted. So that takes us to agenda item number 3. Public questions on notice, and we've received one question from a member of the public, which was circulated separately on the supplementary agenda, which all of you should have, and it is from Mr. Richard Pryor, and could I invite Mr. Pryor to come forward to the allotted space, please, and read out your question, please.
Can you hear me? Right.
You can.
I'm going to read it off the paper so I don't miss anything, just for accuracy. Thank you for the opportunity. The local plan process began in 2015 with a completed timetable now for 2028. So it's forecast to take around 13 years to complete. And the current time plan has Regulation 18 due in spring 2026 and Regulation 9... Yep. So I start from the beginning? Okay. Oh, it's echoing around here. It's quite odd. Okay. The local plan process began in 2015 with completion now timetabled for 2028. So it's forecast to take 13 years in total. The current timeline has Regulation 18 for spring 2026 and Regulation 19, which is the final draft for the inspectorate submission in autumn 2026. Now, if we miss submission by the end of December, the local plan process changes. The government have changed the process, and we have to start all over again. So it's a 13-month process again. Given the track record of deadlines being missed during the past 10 years, what assurances do residents have that the Regulation 19 timeline will be met and the local plan submitted will be a visionary, infrastructure-led, sustainable plan worthy of the 11 years and the significant public funds that have been invested in it? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pryor, for your question. The Preparation and presentation of local plans are huge pieces of detailed and complicated work and take many years for any council to complete. Some councils don't ever submit them. From the start, they should be driven by a project methodology approach and should have timeline milestones. The local plan is formed from a compendium of reports covering a wide variety of subjects, informed from competent officers within the council, as well as external specialist consultants. If the implication of your question is that it's taken too long, I agree. There can be many genuine reasons for this, including limited resources both inside and outside of the council, changes in personnel, changes in political administration within the council, changes to comply with the national planning policy framework set by central government, of which we've seen quite a few in particular over the past couple of years, and which have resulted in the need for many of the documents to be revisited and updated. As you will be aware, the council has a published local development scheme which sets out a timetable for the production of the new local plan prior to the government deadline for submission under the current system of the 31st of December 2026. I have been chairman of this committee for just 6 months, and I'm committed to complete openness and transparency in the process, with the introduction of more of these meetings to get the job done within the set timescales. The Chief Executive, who has ultimate responsibility to deliver the local plan, is in absolutely no doubt about this, as is the leader, along with this committee, and collectively we have a responsibility and laser focus to meet the deadlines. Every planning policy committee includes an update paper on the timetable and next steps. As well as additional officers brought in to support the team, there is also a project manager now supporting the delivery of the local plan, and close working with a range of other departments to ensure that any risks identified are managed early and to keep the whole process on track in order to submit a quality local plan. Subject to council approval, there will be the opportunity to residents and stakeholders to have their say on the draft plan in early 2026. So that's my answer to your question, Mr. Pryor, but it may be that you have a supplementary for me, which you're perfectly entitled to let me have.
I do. Yep. Okay. I see from the agenda that you've got Section D land is now included in the discussions and the work programme with a feasibility study completed by Pryor and Partners. That's no relation to me, by the way, about... You're talking about Section D? Sector D. Sorry, yep. With the feasibility study being completed by Pryor and Partners, about to be commissioned urgently with consultation with members in the drafting of that research project. And that's essentially what the EOI was, the land for the EOI, which this current administration withdrew from in May, I believe it was, when the new administration took over. They withdrew it because they felt that the advice was that these 5,000 homes would be in addition to the current target. But we know that the Housing Minister, Matthew Pennycook, stated in July in 2025 in the House of Lords that that was under review. So it wasn't confirmed, it was still in review. So I wonder whether that work process, which is going to be huge with Southend, could have commenced at that point. That's not a question, it's just a consideration. But given that my first question referred to tight timelines in the amount of work that has to be done, which is huge, we've got 60% of the draft evidence still waiting to come through, to be completed sometime during summer, so the time is very tight with the work being huge. What assurance do we have that this huge bit of work, in addition to what was currently being considered in the planned timetable, will be completed in time, given it's in conjunction with Southend Council? Will it be completed in time for Regulation 19? I think my main question, crucially, beyond that is, will residents have the opportunity to review that and comment on that bearing in mind that Regulation 19, as we know, is simply the legal review of that document, its legality and its soundness. Residents can have an opinion, but not many residents are trained in legal soundness appraisal of a document. So will there be another Regulation 18 brought in for a proper consultation on the final plan, including this potential new town location, before it is submitted? It's a bit wordy, sorry, but that is essentially my question. I'm concerned that there will be a huge amount of work being done, and residents at Regulation 19 won't get the quality of consultation that they would have got at Regulation 18.
Thank you, Mr. Pryor. I will be making a statement in relation to item 4, which is my report and the part that relates to the land north of Southend, which is also known as Sector D. So I would prefer not to overlap that piece of work, but all I would say is that we've got to be a little bit careful not to confuse the two. The expression of interest was its own submission to Sir Michael Lyons, who headed up the New Towns Task Force. And as you so rightly say, it related to potentially, and I think the words at least were used in the document, of 10,000 properties, roughly equal between Rochford District Council land and Southend City Council land. And that expression of interest, you'll be aware of that. I, along with the leader, wrote a letter to Sir Michael Lyons expressing our dissatisfaction with creating a new town on that site. And the expression of interest has gone nowhere as a result. I did say a little earlier that I would be making a separate statement, but what I think we need to be very careful to realise is the land ranks exactly the same as any other land in Rochford District Council and will be looked at within the local plan process. And so there's not separate pieces of work that are required. It's all one under the local plan. But I will be making a statement which hopefully adds a bit more to what I've just said. But I would like to thank you very much indeed, Mr. Pryor, for your question. Very helpful.
Can I just, before, my question was really about the consultation, Regulation 19 and Regulation 18, where 18 is the ability for residents to actually input into the document, well, 19 is technical.
You're going beyond the second question, but what I will say to you is that Regulation 18 and Regulation 19 will relate to Rochford District Council's local plan and will relate to the all pieces of land that are being proposed. There's no question of separating them, as far as I'm aware. I'm looking at officers, and I'm getting an appropriate nod just to support me that it'll all be part of the local plan submission, the eventual local plan submission. Yes. 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 So 18 will include it. Right, thank you very much indeed. We move on to my report on agenda item 4. The full report was circulated as part of the supplementary agenda. And I really just want to amplify the point that is made in the communications section, because I was acutely aware when I took on this role of being chairman that it was very important that we had structured communications across coming out of Rochford District Council that reflected exactly what progress was being made. So I'm actually going to read the sections within the report, which is my report, and it's headed up communication. Communications on the local plan and other planning issues in Rochford began in earnest at the end of October. The programme is designed to ensure that residents and stakeholders have factual information on the planning system, what is happening in Rochford District, and how they can get more information and engage in the process. It includes our planning newsletter, Rooted in Rochford, which is sent directly to around 6,500 residents and will be sent out at least monthly, regular weekly social media posts across a variety of platforms, including Facebook, Nextdoor and LinkedIn, and a refresh of the information on the Council's website to ensure it is easily accessible and understandable. We encourage members to share these links wherever possible, remind people they can sign up to the newsletter and contact the team if there are any issues they would like to see covered in our communications. A detailed engagement strategy for the Regulation 18 local plan will be published alongside the draft plan for approval by members. And I would suggest, officers, that you take account of the points raised by Mr. Pryor tonight so that those are adequately addressed within that communication, because it's important. They're really good points, Mr. Pryor, you know, we want to make sure that they are communicated and, you know, there is a common message that goes out on the very point. So officers will have noted your point, and I assure you it'll be incorporated within the communication. So there we are. Also, taking up your point, Mr. Pryor, our land north of Southend, there is 5 or 6 paragraphs there, which I don't propose to go through all those paragraphs, but I will add to it by saying that this is, as I just said to Mr. Pryor, this is a very different piece of work compared with the joint Rochford District Council and Southend City Council expression of interest submitted to the government's New Towns Task Force earlier this year by this council's previous administration, which proposed the creation of a new town on this land with at least 10,000 new homes split across the Southend and Rochford borders. What was key under that arrangement was that if it had gone ahead, the numbers would have been additional to those set out under the local plan, and where central government have already set an increased target of 15,000 new homes, at least double our original plan numbers. Inevitably, that would have caused an even bigger requirement on the east of our district. May I remind members of the letter I and the leader wrote to the New Towns Task Force, strongly opposed to the expression of interest proposal. Under the local plan process, we have a legal, and I stress the word legal, duty to cooperate. This is not an option. To be clear, the land itself is subject to the same scrutiny under the local plan process within Rochford as anywhere else. If it is considered necessary under advice from officers to obtain evidence and objective information about its suitability or otherwise to develop, then to go against that advice would be irresponsible on the part of this authority. I hope this is helpful, and from the chair, I am proposing that Councillors Richard Linden, Mike Steptoe and myself as chairman are members of that working group that we've been invited to be part of, and that is giving geographical balance across our district as well as cross-party. So at that point, I will invite any questions from members. Firstly, visiting members. I would like to give visiting members a chance to say anything before I go to members of the committee. Any visiting members wish to say anything? Councillor Mrs. Gooding. So you don't have to stand up in this committee.
Good evening, Chairman. It's easier to reach the mic.
Right, okay.
So through you, Chairman, can officers explain how a site assessed, as I quote, on balance not suitable location, with more suitable alternatives identified in the evidence-based, why it is still being kept under the active consideration? Also,
right. Councillor Gooding. Councillor Gooding.
Can I just...
Councillor Gooding, you're actually, it's a different question to the point that I've just been made about the communication. It's my report, and it's about the process that we're being asked to engage in.
So I will carry on to
you're being
explain the methodology of this.
Well, we're not on the methodology yet. We're on the methodology on item 5.
Sorry? Sorry, I'll wait till item 5.
Okay, all right, that's what I was trying to guide you on, because I shall certainly welcome your comments when it comes to item 5. I guessed you were one ahead. I tried to do it diplomatically. Your enthusiasm. Really, this is about my report, the communication on how we move forward on engaging and working with Southend, where, as I said, we have a legal obligation. And I made a proposal for the three of us with evidential reasons why no other visiting members, any members of the committee would like to speak on the point. Councillor Hoy.
Thank you, Chairman. On your report, first I'll move to your proposal or motion. You know, I find words important. If it's a working group, which are the words you used, working groups are defined by a constitution of being members of all groups. In the report it says a member liaison group. So I can't support a group which doesn't include members of all political groups. So I couldn't support the proposal you put forward on that basis. And therefore clarification over whether it's a working group or not would be useful, because if it's a working group it must include members of all groups, is my understanding. Secondly, could I just have clarification on this? I think it goes back to the question asked by Mr. Pryor. My understanding from your report is that Sector D, there will be a report done on Sector D which will go to members of this committee prior to Regulation 19. Can you confirm, therefore, that this report will not be ready in time for Regulation 18 and the public consultation?
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Hoy. Just taking your first point, my understanding, but I will be looking for officer backup on my understanding, is that this is a working group, working liaison group, or whatever name you choose to give it, and we may be into semantics there. But my understanding is that it is a working group of which we have been invited by Southend City Council to be part of, and for some reason they've set a number of 6, and we've been invited to put forward 3 names. That's the history and background as I understand it. So I'm going to look down the line and see which officers acknowledge that, back me up on that point, and then move on to your second point. So I'll defer to Mr. Quilter.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Hoy. So yes, the liaison group, or whatever the term is used for it, is intended to obviously allow for both authorities' members to have representatives come along to talk around that proposal. As we set out, that work is commissioned for consultants, Pryor and Partners, and ultimately that piece of work is to feed into a better understanding of what's necessarily, if that site was to be allocated, and we certainly emphasise that. If it was to be, we would need such evidence to support that allocation at a later date. So really that's the main rationale behind that. But certainly, yeah, the meeting itself, the way it's been set out is there would be 3 representatives from each authority.
Okay, yeah. Right, any other members have any questions?
Sorry, I thought you were going to carry on with the answer about Regulation 18 and the Sector D.
Apologies. Yes, so in terms of the evidence itself, obviously that's just been commissioned more recently, so that work will feed into, as we've set out with the site assessment methodology paper, there's a number of pieces of evidence that will feed into that on an iterative basis, so that's very much work that's feeding into the Regulation 19 stage, and that will be the same for Southend.
I just want to be very clear in my understanding of this then. Therefore, this will not be ready for Regulation 18, it will be ready for Regulation 19 consultation.
That's correct, but obviously in terms of the Regulation 18 consultation, it will include, as we got on the next item, in respect to the site assessment methodology paper, there's the opportunity to provide comments in respect of that site and others.
Right, thank you, members. Will my My report is for noting only, but it does make a proposal about 3 names that I put forward. Unless there's any other names, I will move ahead with the proposal that those 3 names mentioned, Councillor Linden, Councillor Steptoe and myself, form part of that liaison group, or whatever is referred to in there, as is the invitation from Southend. Do I have a seconder on that? Councillor Eaves, and can I take those people voting in favour of those names? And those people voting against? And I think that's all the committee, so there we are. Thank you very much indeed. So that was 5 for, 2 against, and no abstentions. We move on to item 5, which is the substantive item of our agenda. I would just like to make a comment before we begin. There are references throughout the document to preferred. I have to say that I and others thought that perhaps it might be a terminology used within the planning world at local government, local plan stage. We've since found out, since the publication of this report, that it's not a technical word that is used with these sorts of with these reports. And throughout the report, we would like to replace the word preferred with the word potential. So hereinafter, it will be referred to as potential, because preferred really does convey the wrong impression in mine and other members' view. So it will be referred to as potential. Preferred is not going to be used. Councillor Cripps, I will invite you a little bit later on, but I'm not going to just at this stage, because what I would like to do is invite officers to present for us on that report, and then I will open it up, as I've said I will do, to non-members visiting and or non-members visiting, that's right, and then to members for debate. So there's structure within the process. All right. So I turn to officers, if you would like to, Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. So here's to introduce the site assessment methodology paper, which forms part of the evidence base for the emerging Rochford local plan. The SAM document, as we shortened it to, sets out the approach for identifying, assessing and selecting potential development sites for further testing and consultation. It is important to emphasise that this document does not allocate sites. Instead, it provides a framework for narrowing down reasonable options in line with national policy and guidance. The site assessment process is structured around a 5-stage methodology. So that covers stage 1, which is the identification of and initial assessment of sites through the Housing and Economic Land Availability Assessments, or HELAs. Stage 2 is the site appraisal and initial sifting. Stage 3 is further site sifting, prioritisation and classification using the red, amber, yellow, green system and development potential ratings. Stage 4 is testing reasonable alternatives through the sustainability appraisal and other strategic studies. And Stage 5, preparation of draft site allocations for Regulation 19, informed by consultation feedback and updated technical evidence. For this version of the SAM paper, we are predominantly within stages 1 to 3. It represents a point in time during an iterative process that will continue to evolve as further technical evidence and consultation feedback becomes available. Additional supplementary evidence regarding Stage 4 will be provided alongside the Regulation 18 consultation, and an updated site selection paper will be published prior to Regulation 19 consultation, incorporating all 5 stages in full. With regards to Annex E of the document, that provides the summary of the sites identified for testing at Regulation 18. We can display an overview map of these locations on the screen. An interactive map is being prepared to accompany the Regulation 18 consultation. In summary, the SAM paper is presented for noting as part of the evidence base. It demonstrates a clear evidence-led approach to site selection and supports the delivery of sustainable development across the district. happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Quilter. As I said right at the start, putting some structure into the process, I'm going to take any points from visiting members first. Now, in order of the people that came to me and said we would like to make comments, Councillor Danielle Belton was the first councillor, Mrs Julie Gooding was the second, Councillor Cripps, you were the third, having waited until this meeting to put your hand up. But so I'm going to invite Councillor Mrs Belton to make her statement.
Thank you, Chair. Now that we've seen the site assessment methodology report and the extensive list of sites that have come forward for consideration, I'd like to reiterate the fact that land has been submitted does not mean it is suitable, deliverable or acceptable for development. The SAM report is simply a catalogue of land availability and not a blueprint for what Rochford District Council intends to include in a local plan. The term clear preferred site option is somewhat misleading, and I'm therefore pleased that this terminology is now being changed. As councillors, our duty is to assess these sites responsibly through the lens of evidence, infrastructure and genuine community need. Despite the volume of land submitted, Rochford District Council cannot and will not allocate land for 15,000 homes because this number is not grounded in reality. It does not reflect our local population trends, it does not align with our genuine housing needs, and it does not consider the infrastructure we would require to support such unprecedented growth. There is a fundamental discrepancy between the housing targets set for us and the actual population expectations for our district, as set out within the Office of National Statistics. The proposed figure is based on national modelling that assumes growth patterns which bear little resemblance to what is happening on the ground in Rochford. Population projections simply do not justify such a dramatic scale of development, and yet we are continually handed a number that grows larger and more detached from local evidence. We cannot build homes just because government tells us to. Local planning must be based on local reality, not an algorithm, not a formula, and not a top-down target that ignores the character and capacity of our district. Our policy remains the same, and the report supports developing brownfield, part brownfield and contaminated sites as a priority, and I would like to see this government implement policy or financial support to make this more viable. We must protect as much of our vital greenbelt land as possible. Even if we wanted to build 15,000 homes, which we do not, the truth is that our infrastructure cannot cope. Without a flyover or ring road to manage traffic flows, I suspect the road network through South Essex would be pushed past breaking point. We already know what congestion looks like on a normal weekday. Add tens of thousands of additional daily journeys and our area grinds to a halt. Not figuratively, literally. Our transport system would fail. It's not just the roads. Without proper investment in a new hospital or a major expansion of existing healthcare provision, we would be placing impossible pressures on services that are already stretched. Asking residents to accept development of this scale without the infrastructure to support it is not planning, it is negligence. We do need to build more high-quality houses in this district. We want young people to have somewhere they can afford to live, we want families to grow, and we want our villages and towns to thrive, but those homes need to be in the right places, built at the right time, and crucially, in an environmentally responsible way. We will therefore pay particular attention to the sustainability of any proposed sites within this report and any more that come forward in the future, from Braes Lane to Bournes Green, from Dolleman's Farm to Tithe Park and anywhere else for that matter. If we judge those sites to be environmentally unsustainable for good reasons, then we will not progress them. In summary, Rochford District Council's motto is our heritage, our future. We will not betray the first and mortgage the second simply to submit to an algorithm on a Whitehall computer. We were elected to protect the interest of this district, and that is what I expect everyone in this chamber to do. So this evening I want to send a message. We will not allow our district to be shaped by unrealistic targets. We will not compromise our infrastructure, our environment, or our quality of life, and we will not accept a system that demands figures without providing the means to support them. Our plan will be based on evidence, community need and sustainable development, nothing less. And therefore I expect the final plan to be a far reduced number of homes that have been assessed in this SAM report as potentially suitable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Belton. I turn to Councillor Gooding.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll get a second bite of the cherry. So through you, Chairman, can officers explain how a site assessed, as I quote, on balance not suitable location with more suitable alternatives identified in the evidence base, why is it still being kept under active consideration? And how does the sequential testing methodology justify retaining a site that scores less favourably than others in the same settlement when the assessment states that the sufficient, more suitable sites exist to meet the district's housing needs? And furthermore, how much weight is given by this methodology to speculative applications? And if speculative applications were approved, despite being red on the RAYG, on this methodology, would this invalidate our local plan? Thank you.
And just to be clear, Councillor Gooding, for the tape, you were referring, I think, at the start to land north of Southend. Was that you specifically referring to that?
I didn't specify, but
right, okay,
obviously
okay, sorry.
within the report,
Yeah.
I am particularly looking at the CFS 074 site.
Okay. And what site is that?
It's to be Mount Bovers Lane and Gusted Hall Lane.
Right, I think, I suspect it might be. All I would say, and I'll be guided by officers, we've got to be very, very careful, not because I don't want to talk about it, but because under legal constraints, there is a live application in, and I'll be guided by officers. I mean, there's people far more able and professional than me, so...
I didn't specify it.
well, it needed to be, we needed to understand what we were talking about, but I'll turn to officers for comment. Ms. Goodings.
Thank you. Good evening, members. So in terms of the local plan process, that is a separate process to the development management process. So the local plan document that you have before you tonight considers all sites on the methodology as you've seen and can compare them against each other. When it comes to individual planning applications, they'll need to be considered on their merits by officers and then by members at committee. So that particular site, as you say, is an active site, and so we'll be going to committee early next year for a decision, but it will have to be based on the information that members have before them in that specific application. So whilst the information that officers have here in terms of the local plan will be part of those officer considerations, ultimately the development management process is slightly separate to the local plan process.
Thank you. Did you want to come back at all?
No, I was going to ask when we can expect these outline developments to come to committee, but it's good in sorry.
Yeah. And just for you, Councillor Gooding, and members more widely, I'm always very keen to protect our legal position on these things. So I was trying to look after you so that we didn't stray into a difficult area that there's any subsequent comeback. But I thought I heard you talk about land north of Southend, so I must have mixed that up a little bit with Mr. Pryor's earlier point. So thank you very much indeed for that. Right, Councillor Cripps, I think you wanted to.
Thank you, Chair. I was actually going to say that I've already submitted my detailed observations to the officers directly. It's quite lengthy, so I'm sure you won't be letting me go in that sort of detail at this sort of meeting. But just to cover it in a broad way, because I've gone right across the district to various issues. Basically, I've pursued the preferred yellow sites, which appear to, which potentially I've gone for the ones that still wait for certain assessments, flood risk, water cycle, transport, and they are in particular positions where that's relevant. Not all on one site, sometimes, but not always. And I've tried to be even-handed across the district and highlight that and say why I believe such a phrase has been used, preferred, when there's clearly issues that need to be resolved. And although I appreciate this is done to some standard methodology, I don't think that end result of preferred was a wise choice. Thank you.
Thank you. And exactly why we've changed that wording. And thank you for your comments. I'm not sure that there's any officer come back with that point, but it is noted. What I will say is I haven't seen your submission, but without seeing it, Councillor Cripps, I know it will have been a high quality, well thought out, and will be very constructive. So can I thank you, without even seeing your submission, for what you've done, because I know everything you will have written will be intended to help the process, assist it, and using your very valid experience. So that's appreciated.
If you've got some spare time, I'll gladly send you a copy.
Yeah, I've certainly got spare time to go through that and meet you for a coffee, and we'll go through it together. So I think that's really helpful. But thank you very much indeed. Right, now we'll turn to members of the committee who would like to kick off with any comments. Councillor Steptoe.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. If you can bear with me, I do have a number of points of clarification, please, on the process of the how we look at the sites. But first of all, I would just like to say that I welcome Councillor Belton's comments about the numbers, but I still have this very definite worry about this so-called duty to cooperate and how much pressure that will bring on us from Southend. That's my first question, is when we're looking at those sites, how much weight does that carry, this so-called duty to cooperate with Southend, how much weight does that carry within that process? Do you want me to go through the other questions as well, Chairman? Okay, that's okay with me.
Councillor Newport.
Can I just, so because one of my points will pick up on Councillor Steptoe's, and I think it's worth adding to that at the moment. He mentions Southend, but he doesn't mention Castle Point. So I think if you could address both of those local authorities that we border with at the same time, save coming back to it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that makes total sense if somehow we can put some structure in it that achieves that. So if a member raises a point and it's felt that there is some linkage, that would be very helpful.
I'm happy to include that, Chairman. I was talking in general around the duty to cooperate, whether that be Southend, Basildon, Castle Point, or even technically Malden and Chelmsford, if it comes to that.
Okay. Did you want to develop the point at all, Councillor Newport? You have to turn on your microphone because, remember, people can't.
Yeah, no, I just think for completeness,
Yeah.
I think, as Councillor Steptoe's just said, all those areas that we have a duty to cooperate with.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the duty to cooperate, certainly it's along the lines that we need to obviously engage with our neighbouring authorities. There's other statutory parties that we need to engage with, principally organisations such as Essex County Council, so it's not just exclusively our neighbours. It's where there are, in the case of neighbouring authorities, where there's cross-boundary matters that need to be addressed, and it comes down to the comments that we will receive from them. So if once we undertake a consultation, those are the principal points that will begin that discussion and understanding where their concerns lie. And likewise, obviously, where we have previous committees and we've responded to Southend and Castle Point, that's obviously a matter for them to address in their local plan. So ultimately where that process is borne out is through the examination process, where the inspector presides over that and will want to understand how those particular matters have been addressed. Are they significant? And if there's a case that they can't be addressed retrospectively, which is the case with the duty to cooperate, they could be fundamental in that regard. So really the key thing to address that is to ensure there is ongoing engagement and communication, which obviously as officers we are maintaining, in order to understand what our neighbours are proposing, and also what the, in the case of Essex County Council as an example, obviously they'll be principally concerned about the impacts upon the infrastructure that they are looking after, such as education, highways, etc. So really, certainly that's key to that process, is throughout the preparation of the local plan that we're documenting that. We're undertaking meaningful engagement. The key thing is meaningful. And obviously that will be something for the inspector to ultimately preside over. So for when it comes to our examination for the Rochford local plan, we will need to demonstrate that we've met that requirement, and through that evidence of engagement, which ultimately will be, as I say, guided by what's been said in consultation responses, particularly the Regulation 19 stage, which is asking those questions around tests of soundness and legal compliance. So really that sort of comes together through that process. But certainly we, as I say, we are maintaining that communication with our neighbouring authorities, if that's a particular question.
Can I just add, if I may, so for the avoidance of doubt, the duty to cooperate or any unmet need from any other neighbouring authority is not relevant to the SAM. It's not part of the technical assessment that we've done in the SAM.
Thank you, Chairman. That's the bit I wanted to hear. Thank you, Chairman. My other questions are around, you very kindly provided us with a map. That's a step in the right direction and a help, but...
Sorry, quickly on a point of order, Chairman, I've not been provided with a map.
I'll carry on, Chairman. With regards to the map itself, as I say, it's a step in the right direction. It's helpful, but it's not a big help. And by that I mean is that I can't identify from the list that is part of the 251 pages of the pack, I can't identify which site is actually which site on the map. It doesn't show that. Then that needs to be in a much bigger scale, probably over 3 or 4 of these sheets, so we can identify which site is actually being referred to. Ideally, we need an interactive map, and I would like to propose that we do have a proper interactive map that members of the public can look at and that we can understand and comments are put on there. Carrying on that, Chairman, and I hope somebody will support me in that in a second, there are a couple of items, if I've read this map correctly, that are missing, obviously missing. One of them we've had referred to earlier on as Mount Bovis site. I can't see it on this map. The other one is the piece of land that is north of Hall Road, which is directly opposite the roundabout in at the end of Cherry Orchard Way. Again, I can't see that on this map. I don't quite understand why that's not on here. That's my next question, Chairman. If we can have some clarification why they're not on this, and if somebody would like to set me on my proposal for an interactive map, I'd be grateful.
Yeah, we're paused there, but I mean, you know, this subject was raised in the pre-brief that we have for meetings, and we have said, as you rightly say, this is a step better than perhaps we saw previously, in the sense it marks out Rayleigh and Barling and Great Wakering, so you can at least get some dimension. But the interactive map is the answer, with dots so that you can zoom in and actually look at a bit of a narrative. So I do agree with you. But officers, you...
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so as outlined at the beginning, we are intending to produce an interactive map. So that will include the ability to see all of the sites that have been submitted. And to come on to your other point around the certain locations that are not on this map, that's because this is only showing those that have been identified for testing. So those sites are not identified in that list. So this is reflective of Annex E in the SAM paper. So with regards to that interactive map, we certainly will look to have that so you can toggle those layers on and off and zoom in. That will be much more useful, I would suggest, in terms of that. So the intention is, as I said, for that to be ready for public consultation, and that obviously we'll try and get that ready as soon as possible alongside the other documentation we need to prepare. So certainly that's been reflected in what you've said.
Just to clarify on that, Chairman, once it's on the interactive map, members of the public will be able to comment on individual sites through that system?
We can certainly, we're still finalising how the actual consultation system will work, but certainly that's got that ability, so we can take that on board in terms of how people comment. So yeah, we're certainly happy to make sure that it's as useful as possible in that respect. So happy to take that on board.
Thank you for bearing with me, Chairman. I just have two other points.
Can I just come in there?
Yeah, certainly.
I'd just like to get some absolute information with regard to the map, because it's an important point. There must be expert companies out there, who can actually assist with this in pretty fast time. And I would like to respectfully request to officers that we don't try and do this in-house. It's a bespoke piece of work that needs to be done. Obviously, we've got the data, but the interactive bit of it, I would suggest, way above my technology pay grade. And, to do the job properly, I think we probably need to have expertise. Now, it is for you to take that away and honestly assess whether or not we've got the expertise, the resource to do it. If not, make a pretty fast decision that it's got to be outsourced and we've got to pay for it as part of the work. Because I think members of the public in particular, and I'm getting a few nods over there, this is about the council being user friendly on the information. So could I just ask that, I've emphasised the point, but some work needs to be done in fast time to achieve that. Councillor Newport.
Thank you, Chairman, and I endorse what you say. I think we need an expert GIS company to assist. This is something that I've raised time and time again, and as Daniel Kudlow will know, it's something I pushed for previously on the interactive map. But just rolling back from that, Chairman, I think one of the important aspects of this is that we actually need an expert cartographer to produce the map for the offline versions that we're using, because visualization is everything when it comes down to, and we need to make sure it complies with accessibility. So we need to see maps here and that are accessible to those people that maybe have got visual issues or maybe are colorblind or whatever. So we need the experts in to produce these maps, not this map. We need proper maps with proper cartographers. So I think you're right in asking for a professional company, but we need someone that can do digital, but also do hard copy maps, traditional maps for public display as well. So I think the digital first approach is good, but we need to make sure that it's accessible to all.
Thank you. And when I say that earlier we consult other departments, I'm looking across at the leader, and I'm sure she's got this in one of her updates with the chief exec to make sure that resources provided to make it happen. Because in fairness, officers that I'm looking at are experts within their planning field, but they're certainly not experts. And I think they'd be the first to admit within the world of IT that can deliver this. But this is where we need to look at other departments, either internally or externally, to assist us. Yeah. Moving on, Councillor Steptoe.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I would endorse the fact that we need some outside expert help. Going by the aggravation I'm having with our current IT department, I'm not sure. I won't say any more than that. Two other questions. One is, on the map here, there is a number of sites that are adjacent to other sites right across the whole district. Can I have an assurance from officers and confirmation that each site will be dealt with individually, and because its neighbour site is okay, it doesn't mean the next site is okay, and vice versa?
Thank you, Chair. So, I mean, obviously, with regards to the way the sites have been submitted, there are a number of parcels in some cases. If we're looking, for example, at the land north of Southend, I think it's fair to say that is considered as one entity. But obviously, if there are considerations, obviously, as they're listed within the document individually and they're individually numbered, we're more than happy to receive comments on those. But clearly, we do need to understand what the comments also would be in respect of that being considered as a single entity as well. So I think it's a case we can accept comments on that as we go forwards. Clearly, the need to understand what the greater impacts of that together is also important alongside any individual concerns.
So just to clarify on that, Chair, I'm not quite clear on that. Officers mentioned the land north Southend, so that right from Great Wakering right the way through to Rochford, that would be dealt as one site? Is that what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying is that there obviously are individual parcels. If there are comments on those, I do appreciate there's a large swathe of land there in terms of there may well be very different comments from east to west on that site. So I'm more than happy to receive those individual, if there are comments or issues to be raised. But I think in terms, obviously, we still also need to consider that as a single site potentially. Obviously, these are all potential areas. Obviously, we're talking earlier about the land north of Southend work that's ongoing. It'll be looking at that as a whole, but obviously it's comprising a number of different parcels that need to be made up of that potential area.
For obvious reason, Chairman, I'm not particularly happy with that answer, but I accept what he's saying. My final point was around floodplains. It does refer to it on page 28 on a number of the items there on page 28 particularly, and please forgive me if I have missed this within the 251 other pages. I know that the Environmental Agency, along with insurance companies, have remapped all of the flood areas. Can I have an assurance from officers that they are using the very latest information? And I think that's something around about 6 months old, if my information is correct. And if that's not the case, will they be updating the information on those sites that have been recategorised by Environmental Agency and insurance companies, etc., around floodplains?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so I'm not, in terms, we'll have to take that away and check in terms of what the most recent data that was used, but I'm aware of what you've referred to, and certainly the point you raised at the end, we clearly want to make sure that any final work is taking account of the most up-to-date information, so that's certainly the case that we'd want to do that for any, not just flooding, but any category. Obviously, we've got that data, but we can come back and confirm to the committee, obviously, what has been used for this paper. It's fair to say, obviously, that we'll make sure that it's kept up to date as we go forwards.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll thank you for your indulgence there, and I'll move on from that. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, if I can turn to other members and any comments that Councillor Newport.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, thank you, Chairman. So, reflecting on this report, Chairman, I will find this hard to support this paper, and I don't. Sorry, can you hear me now? Hang on, let me move around here because that's microphone's a bit far away. Is that better? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, Chairman, I'll find this report hard to note because when I look at this report, I see several issues with this methodology. So I'll just run through a couple of them at high level. So the methodology is incomplete and premature. There's key evidence that remains unfinished, which includes transport assessment, green belt review, sustainability appraisal, habitat regulations assessment. The report describes itself as a point-in-time snapshot, noting it as evidence endorses a framework built without those critical constraints. The RAYG scoring system lacks the transparent weightings that I would expect to see. So it drives which sites progress. The paper does not publish those clear weightings or explain how conflicts between criteria resolve. The Greenbelt judgment is applied before Greenbelt review completes, and the member scrutiny is bypassed on a material planning decision. So I will find this very hard to note, and as I like to say, rubber stamping. I'm not happy about just noting reports, as you know, and I've repeatedly said to committee and various other committees, I don't believe we should just be noting reports. And those are just my comments on the report, Chairman. Thank you.
Councillor Newport, I've In the light of your comments about noting reports, I have gone back over quite a period of time and noticed that there were quite a lot of noted reports under your leadership as well. So they do come forward because, like you, I'm keen that we make decisions. But I think it's important just to point out the real decisions on all of this come in the full council meeting that will take place at the back end of January, and that is when decisions are actually made. But I take your point about the noting. Now, I don't know, you've made a number of very helpful comments there, and I think it calls for a response from officers on the various points because, as I said earlier, we are relatively lay members in all of this in a planning environment. So, would anyone like to comment on Councillor Newport's points?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the broader point, I think that Councillor Newport's made in respect of, obviously, as we say in the document, it is a point in time. I think obviously it's fair to say that in respect of the evidence documents that are still forthcoming, so for example, you cited the transport assessment. We obviously, there's an aspect, as I say, it is iterative. We do need to understand what are the potential options, which this is set out for that to then be tested through that work. And that in turn then feeds back into this process. So there's very much a case for a lot of this evidence. And it's the nature for any local plan where you have to make sure that you understand a sort of a way forwards and then needs to be tested by the evidence and then can be informed by that and ultimately could be changed as a result of the outcomes of that evidence as it emerges. And likewise for the Greenbelt work, there has been previous Greenbelt studies undertaken. We do understand that we do appreciate that the Greenbelt work does need to be updated, clearly given the new classification of grey belt. As we've explained in previous meetings, that work has obviously we've been trying to commission that with difficulty in terms of the availability of consultants, but we're moving that as quickly as we possibly can to feed into this process appropriately. So I hope that helps.
Thank you. You want to come back? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, only, sorry, Chairman, only that the officer didn't address the transparent weightings for the scoring system.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, in terms of obviously what we've set out in the document so far, there is the classifications that we've given to that. That certainly there's an element of judgment that needs to be made for any of these types of processes. They're not entirely scientific. I think that's fair to say of any planning process. But obviously, clearly, we want to set out what our conclusions are from that work, and there is going to be the opportunity for people to make comments on that, and we can feed that into the process, as we said earlier. So obviously if there are comments such as that, so obviously if there are any suggestions around how the process could be improved through the Regulation 18 consultation, we can certainly take that on board and consider further.
Right, thank you. Any other members? Councillor Hoy.
Thank you, Chairman. I've also got concerns about this report. Some of them overlap slightly with comments already made by Councillor Steptoe and Councillor Newport. And I was also going to note that we're noting the report and not making a decision on it, just so the members of the public are quite clear on that. I think there's a number of key methodology flaws. I've been practicing that all week, by the way, and I still can't say it. I think there's an over-reliance on the relative scoring, the red, amber, yellow, green, instead of absolute suitability. Some sites are marked high viability simply because other sites are even worse, it would appear. There are not because they perform well. So a site might appear viable only because it was compared to an extremely constrained neighbour site. The Greenbelt evaluation is inconsistent. I think it lacks transparency, which again is something Councillor Newport raised. I think there's an issue around defensible boundaries. It's very subjective and inconsistently applied. Some settlements within a few hundred metres of each other, one would be it's fine and the other one it isn't, and they're very similar. There's again, which we've raised and has been raised today, there's no published Greenbelt review yet. That's not accompanying the scoring, so that makes the methodology quite awkward. The sustainability assessment relies on simplistic metrics, distant metrics. It's made based on distance to services, not the quality, safety, reliability or practical availability of those services or accessibility in practical terms of those services. Infrastructure capacity has also been mentioned. It's not really assessed in this report. It doesn't include real analysis of the roads, drainage networks, school capacity, health capacity. I mean, I know I've raised specific examples about schools, which I'm not doing today, but I'm aware that we all know how schools now work and they're grouped. And you could have a school in one village which is grouped with a school in a town, and that's then fine. So that's an issue. So the constraints aren't really weighted properly. Flood risk is considered only at site level, not at catchment level. I'm sad we haven't got Councillor Stanley here today. They ignore downstream impacts, surface water risks, cumulative runoff, drainage infrastructure capacity. They're not considered in the report. So I think this causes lots of problems. This is, again, why I can't support the report as it is. Therefore, I'm putting forward a proposal that we move that this site assessment report is sent back for revision, requiring equal treatment for all sites across all settlements, full consideration of real-world infrastructure constraints, proper green belt and accessibility analysis before any site is promoted, and recognition of parish and ward boundaries. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hoy. You make a number of fair points. I talked earlier about my tenure as chairman of this committee. Mr. Pryor raised concerns, and what I'm desperately trying to do is catch up on things that perhaps over the last X number of years, we're not there. We know stuff has changed under the National Planning Policy Framework, but that shouldn't become an excuse. It is a real frustration of mine about the Greenbelt Review, especially in the light of the changed definition and the fact that the council hasn't been able to procure a consultant to start that work until I think it is March, because everything should really have gone into the Reg 18 pot so that it could all be considered together. So it is a frustration, and I'm not going to shy away from that. I'm trying to pick up the pieces in very short time, and I'm assured by officers that whilst it would have been desirable, it's not particularly wonderful. But I think I'm getting a nudge that Mr. Quilter wants to go. Councillor Newport, do you want to make a quick point?
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Only to say I'm going to second Councillor Hoy's proposal. And I'm with you, Chairman. Let's not fudge this. Let's do a proper job. I think Councillor Hoy's put forward a good proposal. And if we fudge it now, right, we're just going to have...
I can't accept your term fudge. Okay. There is no intention to fudge it, because that sends out totally the wrong message.
If you've just said about missing evidence, I think we're doing our residents a disservice if we push ahead. We know we've got a timetable, but realistically, we should make sure we do the best for our residents that we possibly can. And anyway, as I said, I'm seconding Councillor.
Yeah. And I want to assure you we are doing the best that we possibly can, but we do have to differentiate between filibustering and getting the best evidence that we possibly can. And I'm not suggesting for one moment anyone is filibustering, but we've got to get this job done. And you could spend all night actually talking about any one of these sites and the merits or not. So it does get quite difficult. And I want to get that balance between proper debate, proper discussion. And I'm even going to go so far as to say that I think that there is a responsibility on all 39 members of this authority to look very closely at, areas within their ward and make constructive contribution in exactly the same way as I know Councillor Cripps will have done, because I know Councillor Cripps will have been very objective as opposed to picking up, dare I say, any political interests. I think it's about actually looking at the objectivity and the criteria that has been used. And I'm getting a nod from Councillor Gooding. I think we just have to all come together to make sure that we deliver. And I did actually say earlier in one of my reports, the responsibility is on this committee to deliver it and make sure that we do a good job in the interest. And I think there's a heck of a lot of good stuff in this, but we're here to challenge, to ask questions. But I'll turn to Mr. Quilter.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Hoy, for the points raised. I think obviously it's fair to say that as we've set out within the document, that this is a point in time, as we've just said. Certainly it's not the intent of what we've done to say that we're trying to ignore any of those issues. We've been very clear that the work will need to continue. So this is not the end of the process. This site assessment methodology paper, as we said, is at that sort of third stage out of 5. If the point that's been, or the motion that's been put forward around amending the document, the consequence of that, to be clear, would be that we'd be very unlikely to meet those deadlines for the Regulation 18 consultation, and in turn probably we would be struggling to meet those deadlines for the end of next year. So there are consequences of that. However, I just wanted to explain clearly that the work that we've been doing is very much a case of being clear around where we are, and in terms of giving people the opportunity to have their say on that process. Again, emphasising these are not proposed allocations. It's very much a case of potential test sites for testing, which will then need to go through further work in terms of the evidence.
Any other member wish to make any points? Councillor Linden.
Yes, thank you. Just to clarify, both Councillor Hoy and Newport have brought a point up regarding this report. Both Hoy and Newport, Councillors Hoy and Newport, have brought up points regarding this report, and it's not being full evidence regarding these sites. But my understanding of this report is only going part way towards identifying sites for the local plan. So I'm a little confused why we've got on one side saying there's not enough evidence within it when it's obviously just part of a plan going forward. Could you just clarify that for me? So, you know,
I'm not
sending a report back to get further evidence to fulfil, when I'm actually being told by the officers on one side that it's actually only part of something going forward.
Right. Okay. Can you help me on that?
Yeah, no worries.
Sorry, Chairman, on a point of clarification, if I may, we're not asking for more evidence. We're not asking for that. I can give you a copy of the wording I've used if you want to read that from the chair. If that's
Just
helpful.
let's hear what Mr. Quilter's got to say first of all.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so in terms of the work, as we've explained, it's very much an iterative process. As an example, so for the transport work, we can't run that work until we understand what the potential options are, which is effectively what's going to be coming forward at the next committee. And that in turn then feeds back into the site assessment process in terms of giving us a consideration on that aspect. Obviously, the points raised earlier around infrastructure, the infrastructure delivery plan, obviously, that came to the last committee, that is also key to that. That's the stage 1 report at Reg 18. There'll be further work on that to feed into a Reg 19 version. So as you can see, a lot of that evidence, and not through our own design, that's ultimately how a lot of local plans are prepared and brought forwards. They do need to have that iterative approach to understand, as a consequence, if you was going to try and test every single perceivable option, it would be impossible. So you do need to work out a way of refining that further. Obviously, with the caveat that we've included in here around the fact that these are potential, we're not suggesting that they are meant to be allocations, that in order to understand what the impacts of those potential sites are, that will then form our decisions going forwards. As I say, it may well ultimately be based on the evidence that comes forwards that there are reasons why certain sites or areas should not be developed as a result of that. But until we have tested that and we know the answers, we then have an informed process going forward on that basis. So we do need to have that approach really in terms of local plan making. There isn't a case of having all the evidence done, because you can't do that until you have an idea about where you want to potentially, or what potential areas could be developed. So it does need to sort of work on that basis.
Do you want to come back on?
Yeah, I would have struggled until such time as you've actually changed the word preferred to potential. I do agree with what Councillor Hoy is saying, but your answer that you've just given me is that you will be ongoing with amending and rectifying and updating those questions anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Linden. Councillor Eaves.
Thank you, Chair. I think what we're presented with here is a bit of a chicken and egg situation. We're asked to consider the stage that we're at. And yes, there are omissions, but there are omissions that are omissions for reasons at the moment. I understand that there is a frustration that there are elements that are missing, but those will come if we actually move on from this stage. I do understand the frustrations. I feel the same frustrations, but we must move on. If the problem is if we don't, then missing Regulation 18 is just going to be a disaster for getting the plan progressed.
Thank you, Councillor Eaves. Can I just ask visiting members just for you to have your discussions outside the meeting, please, because it gets a little bit off-putting when you're looking across. I think this is useful debate for officers to hear the points that we're making, but we are committed to delivering this local plan in a qualitative manner. And I think we all as members have responsibility to feed in constructive points to make that happen, especially this committee, because we are collectively guiding the local plan process. And this is a methodology paper as opposed to a site selection paper. So I'm going to make a little bit of an exception because I'm sure the leader wants to add value to something that she said earlier. So, Councillor Belton, I'll let you back in.
Thank you. It's only because there's an amendment been moved, and I'd just like to put some clarity around what I said earlier and this as well. The meeting started with concerns around the timeline, and in your chair's report, you mentioned yourself and me as having laser sharp focus, along with the chief exec and the committee, to delivery. And any delay to that would be completely irresponsible. So we have to move forward. Councillor Linden very ably asked the question that I would have asked as well, because it's my understanding that this report is very much about the now, and the evidence has to keep coming. We have to keep looking at that evidence. We could find a different reason every single day to delay this plan because there is so much work involved in it. It would be so easy to keep finding reasons not to move on, but we have to move on. We have to take the hard choices, and we have to find a set of sites that work for this community and this district. So whilst I'm not a voting member on this committee, I'm hoping that members don't support any delay because we really need to get this job done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Belton. We can't have any delay. It's simple as that. We've got to get on with the job, as I said earlier, and it would be irresponsible to do otherwise. Right. Any other members? Councillor Hoy, did I see you? Yeah. Yeah. Right. We've got to move it along a bit.
I'm happy to.
Let's. Otherwise, we're just going to toggle between the two of you. Let's just move it along.
My point is, in everything I've spoken about, I've not raised a single specific site. I'm talking about the methodology paper as a whole and the methodology used. This, although we're noting this report, we're noting it and it's going to be used as part of the evidence base. So it's still quite important. It's going to be part of the evidence base and it's flawed in my opinion. I'm not asking for wholesale changes. I'm asking for equal treatment of all sites, full consideration of real world infrastructure constraints, proper green belt and accessibility analysis, and recognition of parish and ward boundaries. We've just been told, I think we've been told, that this paper will be updated as we go. Therefore, I can't see the problem in putting this back. If it's not been updated, I think a few of us have misunderstood the answer from the officer. But I think it's really important that we don't put flawed papers in.
Right. As I said to you, I can't support a motion that starts putting things back because that just means that we're postponing. There is a fairly tight timetable. I do think that the points you've made should be fed in. Officers should take account of member contributions, but that can be done in a constructive way. It doesn't need to be put back, I would suggest. But look, I think we need to go to a vote because you've quite rightly made a proposal. Can you just, so that we all understand, read out your proposal, please, Councillor Hoy?
Thank you, Chairman. I can pass this to the officers afterwards so they can put this in the minutes. We therefore move that the site assessment report be sent back for revision, requiring equal treatment for all sites across all settlements, full consideration of real-world infrastructure constraints, proper green belt and accessibility analysis before any site is promoted, recognition of parish and ward boundaries.
Thank you. And you have a seconder, Councillor Newport. And anyone wish to speak specifically to that motion? Councillor Linden.
Sorry, just to clarify, yes, again, this is a ongoing report that is changeable, and items are being added and taken away as we progress. So everything that Councillor Hoy has just said is actually being inclusive in this report as and when it is relevant to go forward. Am I understanding that correctly?
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, the work, obviously, that we've been preparing now, and obviously other evidence documents alike, they will be available alongside the Regulation 18 consultation for comments. And obviously any work that we're doing in the meantime, further evidence, updates to evidence that's already been prepared, that will feed into this process. So, like I say, it's very much an iterative approach as we need to, obviously, as that comes forward, so as you say. But regarding in terms of feeding into the Regulation 18 consultation, the documents that we're putting before the committee is ultimately what we would have alongside that Regulation 18 consultation for comment.
Councillor Steptoe?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm afraid I can't support the motion, but I do pick up on one point that Councillor Hoy has mentioned there about the parishes. I think going forward, going back to my map, I was talking about earlier on, that I think it's going to be very important that the parishes are shown on this map and shown so they can understand exactly what comes into their areas and that they can comment on. So I'd like to pick up on that point and ask officers when they're redoing the map, please can they include that?
Right, any other members wish to? Councillor Linden, very quickly.
Sorry, I'm struggling with this, quickly or slowly. What Councillor Hoy has said is correct, but the officers are telling me that this is going to be included in their ongoing amendments to this report going forward. So is there any way that what Councillor Hoy has said, rather than sending something back and delaying, it can be incorporated within the wording on this report so that we can actually move forward?
Well, Councillor Linden, I see it very clearly. I think the points that Councillor Hoy has made are very good points that members, that officers ought to be taking account of. If you ask me if I can support a specific motion which effectively calls for a delay in the whole process, no, I can't. So I'm not in any way putting down the points that Councillor Hoy has made. I think they're good points. But to make a motion which effectively is sort of saying, well, let's have a look at it again at some timeline in the future, given the timetable, I can't agree to. That's my understanding of what's being proposed. But I don't know whether officers want to come in and give further clarity.
Thank you, Chair. So as I understand them, so in terms of the points that Councillor Hoy has raised, obviously that will require further reassessment of all the sites that are in that list, because if we're talking about changing the categories now, if there's going to be a further refinement of that for whatever reason that may be, that ultimately will be a significant amount of work. So I'll make sure, again, that we're being consistent in our approach, which is obviously key to this, to ensure that it is sound evidence. That's not a quick turnaround job. That's something that we need to obviously consider going forwards. But certainly those sort of comments, as I mentioned earlier in response to Councillor Newport and the points he raised, if they are sort of points to that effect that they feel that they want to raise during the consultation, we're more than happy to receive them and go forwards. As I say, really the way to think about this is the Regulation 18 version at the point in time, and then we'll be refining that further for the Regulation 19 version, the final version, which incorporates all of those 5 stages and any other comments that we receive and any further evidence updates. So that's kind of the way to sort of differentiate the two, but very much a case that there is an opportunity for that further input at a later stage.
Very quickly, Councillor Newport, otherwise we're just going to be bouncing this around all night.
Yeah, the officer mentioned my name, so I just thought I'd come back in on this. And, yeah, so I had raised earlier about the transparent weightings. The report lacks them. And I was very surprised that Councillor Eaves didn't jump in at that point, where he's made a very, very strong case in other committees about weightings and being transparent. And this lacks that transparency. So are you able to incorporate this into the consultation about how those sites have been weighted?
In terms of, obviously, as we say, what the document sets out is clear on what the conclusions are from that process. I think in terms of any further updates to the document itself, if there's going to be more interrogation of that is going to take some time to establish. I think we have to be very careful in terms of getting into obviously the much detail as possible, but this does need to stand up to scrutiny when it comes to a fair process. Obviously, there is kind of a need to make sure that we're, as we said at the beginning, treating everything in a similar way. So I think we have to be sort of the level that we're putting this at this stage is very much along the lines of how lots of other local authorities approach this process. And it's very easy to get bogged down into a lot of competing or complicated processes when it comes to trying to explain that side of it. I think certainly in terms of obviously the conclusions that have been set out within that document, they're there for scrutiny and can be commented upon. So I think that's obviously what's there for the consultation at a later stage.
Right, I'm going to take it to the vote now. So you've made your proposal, you've read it out, you've got a seconder. So I'm asking, first of all, for those people in favour of Councillor Hoy's motion. There's 2, and those against. And that's 5. So that motion...
Chairman, I'm not... Oh, sorry. I'm premature. I'll wait.
Sorry? Right,
Yeah,
okay.
Could you just record my name in the minutes, please?
Add mine, please.
Right. Are there any other comments relating to this report this evening? I'm looking around because if there aren't, I will take it to the recommendation, which is... It's all right. It's not a full vote. It's a noting vote, but I ought to read out the recommendation. To note that the site assessment methodology paper, as part of the evidence base for the emerging Rochford local plan, and members, is that noted or not noted? And I suspect that it's 5 noting it and 2 not noting it.
Chairman, can it be recorded that I don't note this report for use as part of the evidence base?
Yeah, ditto.
All right. Right, and on that note, at 21:01 hours, that concludes the meeting for this evening. Can I thank you all very much indeed for attendance tonight. Thank you for your contribution. And Councillor Linden, just before Councillor Linden, can I just... I'm in the process of closing the meeting, but I just want to take this opportunity of wishing everyone an enjoyable Christmas and a very happy New Year from the Planning Policy Committee. Thank you very much indeed.